Hello there on this national budget reading day. It's a bit chilly out there depending on where you are. But listen, a national budget is mostly a difficult business to understand for a lot of people because it has a lot of numbers and terminologies that a majority of locals find very difficult to comprehend. But worry not, because tonight my panelists will help us simplify the numbers and allocations from an East African perspective, with focus on pulling the regional economy out of the COVID-19 mess. You don't want to miss that conversation that will be coming up in the course of this particular program. But for now, let's take a look at the top stories tonight.
Ahead on Africa 411 tonight. The 2020-2021 national budget unveiled under historic circumstances. But what do the numbers mean? We'll be breaking that down for you. Also in the program, we will tell you how tough COVID-19 times denied CS Yatani the pleasure of enjoying budget reading customs. And more hurdles for cross-border truck drivers as COVID-19 infections rise past 3,000 mark. Plus, justice at last. Police officers accused of inhumane treatment of a robbery suspect in Nakuru arrested following public outcry.
Welcome to this broadcast. My name is Eugene, and Nangwe, our sign language interpreter, as always, is the amazing Anne Wairimo. Now, remember, you can be part of this particular program. All you need to do is tweet us at I'm Eugene Anangwe, that's my personal handle, or you can tweet at TV47KE. Remember to add the hashtag Africa411. It makes it easier to actually track your feedback. Remember, we'll be reading some of them in the course of the program. Now, the Ministry of Health and that of Water and Sanitization have had their budgetary allocations slashed even as the country battles with COVID-19 and effects of floods. However, the Ministry of Health is well catered for in the economic stimulus package promised by President Uhuru Kenyatta. Our reporter Mwangi Maina focuses on the losers in the 2020-2021 budgetary allocations.
In the much-awaited 2020-2021 budget, whose focus is on economic stimulus in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, the Ministries of Health, Water and Sanitation are among the biggest losers. Other ministries who have had their budgetary allocations slashed include the Ministry of Energy, Interior and Coordination of National Government, State Department for Housing and Urban Development, and Transport Department. As the country faces a life and death battle against coronavirus, budgetary adjustments did not favor the Ministry of Health that is carrying the burden of the virus. The ministry had its budget slashed with 12.2 billion shillings, with the Water Ministry losing 7.8 billion shillings. The Energy Ministry has had its budget reduced by 21.5 billion shillings and that of ICT losing 7.8 billion Kenya shillings. The budget of Ministry of Interior and Coordination of the National Government was slashed by 6.9 billion shillings, and the State Department for Housing and Urban Development is 5.5 billion shillings less, with the Transport Department having its allocation cut by 21 billion shillings. This financial year budget is anchored on coronavirus-related expenditure, provisions to mitigate the effects of floods, pending bills and job evaluations. The Judiciary and National Assembly have got their allocations slashed too. The budget has reduced by 74.3 billion shillings from 2.7 trillion shillings to 1.39 trillion shillings. Mwangi Maina, TV47, Nairobi.
Still remaining with budgetary matters, the National Treasury CS Ukur Yatani today struggled to maintain the budget reading rituals, including the traditional photo ops. But as he did so, the budget rituals fell short of the COVID-19 commitment of the containment restrictions. The senior government officers had no masks on and literally no distance between them. Nancy Kimuyu, our reporter, was there and filed the following report.
A few minutes past 2 o'clock, the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Planning, Ukur Yatani, comes out of the revolving doors at the Treasury building. a briefcase in his right hand, holding it with a firm grip. It is the symbol national budget briefcase, and it comes with its own rituals, performed at the entrance of the Treasury building before the CS heads to the National Assembly to present the budget statement. And like many finance ministers before him, Ukuru Yatani displayed the briefcase to the waiting journalists and few members of the public. A photo op with other senior Treasury officials and stakeholders in the budget-making process followed. All this time, CS Yatani dons a bold smile. Probably it's a resolution to look at the brighter side of a budget-reading environment riddled by numerous COVID-19 odds and narrowed tax streams. Talk of COVID-19, and here, caution seemed to have been forgotten, maybe for a moment. During the photo op, all the senior government officials removed their masks. They hardly maintained distance in keeping with COVID-19 containment restrictions. Ukuru Yatani kept the Volkswagen Passat tradition to travel the short distance between his office and Parliament. At Parliament buildings, only a few members of the press were allowed to get in. And here, Yatani and his team had another photo op. Photos and more photos. But alas, the chairperson of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, Kimani Ichung'wah, was late to the party. Ichung'wah hurriedly made his way to Parliament a few minutes after Yatani and his team had arrived. Inside the chambers, only a few members of Parliament were allowed in, contrary to other times when all members of both the Senate and the National Assembly would follow the proceedings firsthand in the plenary. Indeed, Ukuru Yatani's first budget reading occasion will go down in history as a unique one.
Honorable members and fellow Kenyans, it's a great honor to present to this August House and to the country the highlights of the budget for the financial year 2020-21.
Nancy Kimuyu for TV47.
Very interesting day indeed right there. I would love to read your thoughts on today's events in the course of the program. Feel free to share them. #Africa411. Now, truck drivers have been named as the top cause of the surge in COVID-19 infections in many border towns. A worrying trend now. Of course, leaders from borders and border areas and truck owners, together with truck drivers, have resorted to an unending blame game on the poor state of affairs at the borders. The government today set aside 25 million Kenya shillings in the 2020-2021 national budget for the erection of modern walk-through sanitizer booths at border points to curb the spread of coronavirus. Zainab Mohammed with the details.
The government has constantly blamed truck drivers for failing to follow COVID-19 containment measures, leading to high congestion of trucks at border points, the number one cause of surge in coronavirus infections across border towns.
The problem we are experiencing at the Malaba-Busia border is largely a making of the truck drivers and the truck owners, because our protocols state clearly that you need to have your test taken 48 hours before travel, and you are issued with an attestation of testing.
On the other hand, truck drivers are blaming rogue police officers for creating chaos at border points. The drivers claim some police officers are vandalizing their trucks whilst asking for bribes in exchange for entry in and out of the country.
Siku ikifika, mtu ukiwa na 1,000 unapatiana askari. Hiyo gari unapewa escort, unaenda hadi kwa mizani ukapime.
Wale walinda usalama badala kuja tusaidia na ulinzi, wanaongea namba pale tunaenda. Hawaulizi shida zetu ziko wapi. Hao wamekuja, hii corona hii imefungua njia yao kukula, wanakula zaidi sasa.
Leaders from border points have also expressed their concern over the worrying trend at border points and are now calling upon the government to take immediate action in order to reduce the rising number of infections in their counties. Busia County recorded 37 new COVID-19 cases on Thursday, most of whom are truck drivers.
The testing to be really done from Mombasa, where these trucks are coming from, and only those that have the negative certificate should be allowed to enter into our county.
And this one now, we have reached a point where we are not going to be so much diplomatic, because we addressed it last week. We even met the IG of police, and all indications were that this was to be implemented. So far it hasn't. We want also the sanitization of the trucks. All those trucks should be sanitized before they are allowed into the county.
We members of parliament from Busia are really concerned that the truck driver issue has gone beyond. Busia now is ranking number 3 with over 200 now positive COVID-19 people, and most of them are truck drivers. Our concern is that these drivers are supposed to be tested from the point of exit, and another concern is that when they come here and they are not tested, they go across to Uganda, they are tested and brought back to Kenya. When they are brought back to Kenya, they intermingle with the people.
However, the government is working on a long-term solution to this problem. In the 2020-2021 budget, the government set aside 25 million shillings for establishing modern walk-through sanitizers booth at border points. This is as the total number of COVID-19 cases in the country rose to 3,291 after 121 more people were tested positive in the last 24 hours. Nairobi County had the highest number of the new cases with 49 cases, Busia 37, Mombasa 20, Kajiado 5 and Migori 4. 44 people have also recovered from the virus as 3 others succumbed to the virus. For TV47, I'm Zainab Mohammed.
Well, allow me to take you to Rwanda now, where the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning there has said that COVID-19 pandemic has had adverse effects on their economy, consequently leading to the decline in the tax base for the fiscal year 2020 to 2021. Finance and Economic Planning Minister Uziel Ndagijimana says that the government plans to spend about 3,245.7 billion Rwandese francs in the 2020-2021 fiscal year. This represents an increase of 228.7 billion Rwandan francs compared to the 3,017.1 billion Rwandese francs in the 2019-2020 fiscal year revised budget.
The Rwandan Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, Dr. Uziel Ndagijimana, presented to both chambers of parliament the budget framework, paper, BFP, and midterm budget estimates for 2021 and 2022-2023. Addressing lawmakers, Minister Ndagijimana noted that while government continues to implement measures to promote export diversification and reduce exposure to external shocks and imbalances over the medium term, economic challenges posed by COVID-19 outbreak called for particular actions for quicker response. The key priorities for the 2020-2021 national budget are strengthening the health system, increasing agriculture and livestock productivity, scaling up social protection coverage, creation of employment opportunities through investment in public works and support to micro, small, medium and large enterprises affected by COVID-19. Other interventions include support for Made in Rwanda, promotion of digital technologies to improve service delivery, improving access to quality education, eradicate malnutrition and stunting, and strengthening disaster preparedness and management.
Now, back in Kenya, and the High Court Judge Weldon Korir has actually declined to overturn the impeachment of Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru, ruling that MCAs did not violate any court order. This happened as a section of Kirinyaga residents held peaceful protests demanding a complete ouster of Waiguru by the Senate. Eli Logova has the details.
Dismissing the petition filed by Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru, High Court Judge Weldon Korir stated that the members of Kirinyaga County Assembly did not violate any court order. Governor Anne Waiguru had filed a petition seeking court injunction to bar the members of County Assembly from discussing her impeachment motion. Waiguru will now incur the cost of the case. Dismissal of Governor Waiguru's case come as protests erupted in Kutus town, calling on the Senate to validate the ouster of the governor.
Mambo ambayo imetoka Kirinyaga County Assembly ilingane na ile ya Senate. Kwa hivyo Senate ndio tunangoja ituokoe. Na hatudhani kuna senator moja atasimama kumtetea Waiguru kwa yale maneno ambayo yote tumepata.
The County Assembly of Kirinyaga has already submitted to the Senate copies of proceedings detailing the allegations leveled against the governor. Waiguru's fate now lies with the Senate.
Tunataka gavana aende kapumzike, tumechoka na yeye. Kila wakati tunaambia tutatufanyia hivi, hakuna kitu anatufanyia. Tukifanya kazi sisi na youth, pesa zinakuwa za wazee. Sasa tunasema acha gavana yetu aende akapumzike. Acha aende tu akapumzike.
Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has already started a probe into allegations of corruption leveled against the Kirinyaga governor. Eli Logova, TV47, Nairobi.
Interesting turn of events right there. We would love to read your comments on the stories we are airing right here on Africa 411. Keep them coming. You can definitely also feel free to share an SMS. 22047 is the number. Now let's carry on with the broadcast. The Ministry of Sports, Arts and Culture has been allocated 14 billion Kenya shillings in the 2020-2021 budget. The allocation is a huge increase from the 5.3 billion Kenya shillings added to the fund in last year's budget. Sports infrastructure in the country is set to receive a boost if Parliament approves these allocations.
Mr. Speaker, sports, culture, tourism and arts contribute immensely to our economic development by boosting job creation for our youth and generating foreign exchange. To support this sector, I propose an allocation of 14 billion to the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund.
Right, it's time for us to take a short break. Don't go too far because we've got lots lined up for you. When we come back, stay with us.
I don't know about my heart. I want to stay with me.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for choosing TV47. This is Africa 411. We're glad you're watching. I see Odan Jom Falme on our Facebook Live feed who says this is the future TV. God bless the station. Maureen Mutiso is also watching from Rwanda. Chiteri S. Thomas is also with us. Conquest Abel is also joined us live on our Facebook live stream. You can also rush there and be able to be part of this particular program. We'd love to read your thoughts on the stories that we are running for you right here tonight. Let's kick in with the next story right here, where the tourist sector is, rather in the country, is one of the biggest gainers in this year's national budget, having been allocated 3 billion Kenya shillings. The government has further rolled out a food-sustaining strategy meant to develop a roadmap to the post-COVID-19 phase. And as Joash Ansari now reports, the recently established Nairobi Metropolitan Service has been allocated 26.4 billion Kenya shillings.
The Nairobi Metropolitan Services NMS has been allocated 26.4 billion shillings. This aimed at helping Mohamed Badi-led team to implement key functions transferred to the national government by Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko. Treasury CS Ukuru Yatani, however, says 15.9 billion of the NMS budget will be drawn from Nairobi County's equitable share. The funding also includes 1.5 billion Kenya shillings from national government's equitable share and 600 million conditional grants.
Nairobi Metropolitan Services has been allocated Kenya shilling 26.4 billion in the financial 2020-21, which includes Kenya shilling 15.95 billion from the Nairobi County's equitable revenue share for the financial 2020-21.
The hospitality sector is also among the biggest gainers of the 2020-2021 budget. 3 billion has been proposed to help in restructuring of the tourism sector.
The government has initiated a number of urgent measures, including a temporary lifting of the ban to hold meetings in private hotels by government agencies.
The previous budget for the State Department for Infrastructure was 193.8 billion, which has now been increased to 237.9 billion in this year's budget.
They have set aside Kenya shilling 128.3 billion for the Big Four agenda drivers and enablers.
Further, CS Yatani announced that the government will increase allocation to the security to ensure security is achieved to attract foreign investors.
I'll be proposing allocation of funds to strengthen our security and investigative agencies. This is because a secure and conducive business environment will attract foreign direct investment that's necessary for economic recovery.
Other sectors that have received a boost include the State Department for Crop Development, which got an additional of 12.7 billion on its previous budget. The State Department of Correctional Services got an extra of 6 billion, while the State Department for University Education got an additional of 5.4 billion Kenya shillings. The CS has also proposed an amount of 13.1 billion Kenya shillings for pending bills meant for contractors, suppliers and manufacturers. Joash Onsare, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you very much, Joash Onsare, for that report. Elsewhere, 5 people, among them 3 police officers, are being held for allegedly tying a woman with a rope and then dragging her using a motorcycle in Nakuru over robbery claims. Now, this is definitely the latest on this particular story, and probably justice for the lady.
3 police officers and 2 civilians were arrested on Thursday. Among the officers arrested is Ulenguroni Station Deputy OCS David Kiprotich after a video of them dragging and whipping Mercy Chorono emerged on Wednesday. The Directorate of Criminal Investigation is probing the 3 officers from Ulenguroni Police Station over the incident. The lady was left nursing serious injuries and was transferred to Nakuru Level 5 Teaching and Referral Hospital for further treatment. The victim is said to have suffered soft tissue injuries on her right hand and a broken leg.
They have come to see a client whom we are treating here, referred from Ulenguroni, arrived this morning. She's being prepared to theatre so that we can put external fixators to a fracture she has on her lower leg.
Rift Valley Regional Commissioner Jordan Natembea visited Cherono and has condemned the incident, which sparked nationwide outrage. Mr. Natembea says the corps, who include a senior police officer, have recorded statements with DCI detectives, and those found culpable will be arraigned in court to face charges of assault.
All the officers who participated in this, including the one who rescued, as we speak now, they're being interrogated. They are with the CID and they're also recording their statements. If they're found culpable, they're going to be taken to court. Yeah. Actually, she participated in that robbery on the 6th. Yeah. She was mentioned by others, and she mentioned others have already appeared in court. She has not gone to court because of obvious reasons. But once she gets well, she's going to face justice, and those who assaulted her will equally face justice.
He said 4 other suspects were in custody in connection with the attack, and police had intensified search for the motorcycle that was used in the incident. Natembea said a police officer had claimed that Ms. Cherono, together with 2 other accomplices, broke into his house on June 6th and stole items, among them police uniforms. He said 3 suspects who fled with some of the items from the officers' quarters had already been arrested and charged. Already, the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA, has revealed that it has launched investigation into the incident. IPOA chairperson Anne Makori said investigation into the incident had been launched with a view to having rogue police officers who may have been involved in the attack punished. Ms. Cherono had been suspected of stealing a gas cylinder, a television set, a laptop, and clothes from police quarters at Amazon Estate in Ulinguroni. Lexi Kimani, TV47.
Right, still remaining with Kenya, the national budget seeks to revive Kenya's dwindling economy following the influx of the coronavirus pandemic in the country. While presenting this particular budget, the budget statement at Parliament Thursday afternoon, National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ambassador Ukur Yatani said the new budget will be a stimulus to cushion livelihoods and businesses worst hit by the novel coronavirus. David Muthoka reports. Will be
measured pomp and color amid prevailing social distancing rules marked Finance CS Ambassador Ukur Yatani's descension on the steps of Treasury House Wednesday afternoon. With a briefcase in tow, the CS was prepared to present his first budget statement as Finance CS. And as he stood at the August House to deliver the 2020-2021 budget statement, he had a message of hope to the nation. Singing a slightly different tune compared to his predecessors, Yatani said that the new budget was partly dedicated at addressing the harsh effects that the coronavirus pandemic has had on livelihoods and businesses in the country.
This is further expected to create and protect jobs, stimulate industrial growth, and ultimately steer economic recovery.
The stimulus prioritizes 7 sectors, among them infrastructure, health, tourism and hospitality, environment, manufacturing, education and agriculture. Under tourism, Yatani has vowed for an aggressive post-COVID tourism marketing, with soft loans now available to hotels through the Tourism Finance Corporation. 3 billion shillings have also been set aside for renovation of facilities and the restructure of business operations. Up to 160 community conservancies are eligible for grants, with the government also pledging to inject 2 billion shillings that will go to the Kenya Wildlife Service. Matters Health, the Finance Ministry has budgeted 1.2 billion shillings to recruit a cohort of 5,000 healthcare workers for 1 year. $500 million shillings are set to facilitate the supply of 20,000 beds to public hospitals, with a further 25 million shillings set to purchase 50 modern walk-through sanitizers at border points and public hospitals. Yatani saying the ministry is hell-bent on embracing the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya mantra, as he announced that the local car assembler sector was set to benefit from a 600 million shillings kitty. With the rate of unemployment on a steep rise in the country, 10 billion shillings have been put aside to cater the Kazi Mtaani initiative that seeks to employ up to 200,000 youth in urban settlements. Under the Kazi Mtaani initiative, the youth will be responsible for fumigation, drainage, rehabilitating and maintaining access roads in the country. David Muthoka, TV47.
Interesting developments right there. Of course, lots of feedback that has been coming through concerning the budget for 2020-2021. Andrew Simiu had mentioned earlier, expect zero bailouts of government corporations, allow all failing state corporations to die a natural death. That way, labor and other resources will be efficiently allocated by market correction. Interesting feedback right there. Another one says Kenya's economy was already sick and in critical care pre-COVID-19 budget. The statement is one thing, rolling out fiscal and monetary policy to spur production, increase savings and investment is yet another. Let me just check out another one right here. Mutua says, don't expect me to talk about Kenya. It's beyond salvaging. I'm so done with our republic. This is definitely looking at the budget and how this budget will be financed. Keep those the feedback coming. All you need to do is just tweet us at TV47KE or at Eugene Anangwe, and remember to add the hashtag Africa411. Allow me and my sign language interpreter Anne Wairimo to take a very short break, and when we come back, we are switching over to Burundi just to be able to look at the state of affairs in that particular country and our conversation on pulling out the regional economies of the East African community out of the COVID-19 economic mess. Stay with us.
We want to do oven-baked pork. We want to do oven-baked pork.
Mwaka 1992 ndio lokuwa tarehe kamili ya Stella kurudi Kenya. Tina mama, baby era Mungu kira baba ni nelangi ogodo ifungu pancho. watu.
This is where real hype lives. Mind-blowing entertainment is found right here.
Hi, what's up, beautiful people? This is your girl Nadia Mohammed, aka Kanadia Kantambe.
Your favorite superstars brought to you by us straight to your living room. This is where we party non-stop, beat after beat. Bombala Sana every Saturday from 10 a.m. with Tony Mwirigi.
Ina show bab kubwa, show ya kizazi, show ya kibabe, show imeenda shule ikasoma, ikagraduate, show ikaletwa on air. Bombala Sana.
And DJ Suleiman.
Mekucheki toka zamani.
Thank you so much for still being with us. As promised, we now cross over to Burundi, and the country is in mourning, and they are mourning the sudden death of the outgoing President Pierre Nkurunziza. In a statement issued on Tuesday, the government there announced that the president died of a heart attack on the same day, a few weeks before the official handover of power to President-elect Evariste Ndayishimiye. We now cross over to Burundi to speak to Burundi-based reporter Moses Habyarimana. Moses is joining us via way of Skype. And Moses, if you can hear me, we understand that today there was a cabinet meeting to deliberate on the next step or the next course of action following the death of President Nkurunziza before handing over power. What do we know that came out of that particular cabinet meeting today?
What we know currently is that the cabinet meeting has sought to go to actually request the Constitutional Court to guide them.
You seem to be having some connection issues right there with Moses. Of course, Moses, if you're still there with us, Moses, if you can hear me, you are continuing to say something. If you can, kindly proceed.
No, I just mentioned that about the Constitutional Court, which had actually been sorted by the government, say that they have to now to go to the Constitutional Court, which is to decide on who is supposed to sit as an interim president of Burundi until August, when we expect the president-elect Evariste Ndayishimiye to take oath.
Mm-hmm. Right. There is information that has been coming from Burundi concerning the health status of the late Pierre Nkurunziza's mother and family. Could you just confirm for us what is their state of health today? There's been rumors of the passing of Nkurunziza's mother. Of course, we've seen some contrary information around this. What is the actual state of affairs as far as their health status is concerned?
Well, actually, there's no official statement about it, about that the president's mother died, but we understand that one of the advisors from the president's office said that those are still rumors and that the mother of the president is in good health and she's doing fine. So we have seen such kind of information which has been circulating on social media. which has sparked reaction and worry in the citizens and also Burundians after the death of President Pierre Nkurunziza. But the official confirmation for now we have is that the president's mom is in good health and she's stable.
Great. Moses, before I let you go, of course, there are those who are now worried about the state of affairs, what happens next. I remember the last time we talked on Africa 4-on-1, you mentioned how these elections or the past elections in Burundi, the presidential elections, were very important for the country because of the transition and the democratic transition of power. Now with this kind of scenario we're looking at right now, what are the possible scenarios if things go whichever way?
I think right now we're able to see possibly the president-elect. Actually, it's now a very difficult situation because, you know, the constitution says that the interim has to come in case the president dies, then the interim president has to be from the speaker, the speaker of the National Assembly. In order to conduct the elections, but we know that the elections we already be conducting elections, and we have already the president-elect. So there is this scenario whereby we now have to wait for the Constitutional Court to determine exactly if we are moving on with the speaker as the interim president or the Burundi president-elect to take oath earlier. So these are the kind of scenarios which may happen for the coming days.
Right. Moses, I want to let you go for now. And of course, we're hoping that you're keeping well and safe. Of course, very little information coming from Burundi as far as what the COVID-19 is concerned. Probably as you leave us tonight, is there any updates, any latest concerning the novel coronavirus infections in Burundi?
Yes, but now the country actually has just announced more cases of coronavirus. Those are 11 cases, which we had 83 now plus 11, which comes up to 94 cases of coronavirus in Burundi. But this hasn't been largely, communicated during this period. Now people are now more concentrated in mourning, and we haven't seen that any change in measures of controlling the pandemic in Burundi since it erupted. But what we see is that it now start actually to put up 7 days of mourning, whereby they have now actually stopped and banned music or karaoke in the clubs, in bars, in any public place until the 7 days of mourning.
Mm-hmm. Right. Moses, thank you so much for making time to speak to us right here on Africa 4-on-1.
Thank you so much, Anand.
Right, that was Moses Habyarimana live from Burundi speaking to us on the state of affairs there as the country is in mourning, and he tells us that the country has declared a 7-day national mourning period for the late President Pierre Nkurunziza. That's the outgoing president. Of course, very trying moments for that particular country, and of course it remains to be seen how things will definitely turn Of course, let's definitely see how things turn out in those particular matches. It's time for us to take a very short break now. And remember, when we come back, we try to make sense of the budget reading. Of course, we know across the East African community, several East African member states did go ahead with reading their national budgets, as others failed to do so and mentioned that they'll do that in later dates. I have our panelists who are on standby. One of them is Abubakar, who's actually already right there watching us right now. When we come back, we'll be diving a bit deeper into the numbers and trying to make sense of how East African economies can get out of the murky waters of the COVID-19 economic mess. Stay with us.
We want to do oven-baked pork. We want to do oven-baked pork.
Now, welcome back. It is time for us to talk a bit about the issues of digesting the budget reading for some of the East African states, and just to be able to understand and weigh in terms of the budgets for the sub-Saharan Africa, in terms of lifting these economies in this region out of the COVID-19 mess. I'm now joined by way of Skype Live from Uganda by Abubakar Mayanja, who's an economist at ABL Dunamis. Thank you so much, Abubakar, for joining us. I'd like to request you to try to stabilize your shot so that now we can be able to continue with this very important conversation. Thank you for joining us from Uganda. We understand that Uganda too, just like Kenya, had their national budget reading. And of course, before this budget reading, I'm sure there were expectations on the ground by several citizens on what should be in this particular briefcase in terms of this particular budget. Talk to us about what you heard today, the Minister of Finance say in Uganda, versus what you think were the expectations of Ugandans as far as the budget is concerned.
Yes, there wasn't many surprises. But what was a bit surprising initially was exactly how quickly the economic numbers had deteriorated. Mm-hmm. And the difference, the major difference really is that Uganda has increased its budget by 12.3% from the previous year, from 40.5 trillion to 45 trillion, with a theme that focuses on business recovery, industrial recovery, and restoring livelihoods. So you could say that one of the surprises there was, apart from the usual focus on development budgets, there was more of a focus on making sure that the economic environment does not deteriorate further. There was some respites in terms of when people are expected to pay as you earn in order to increase or reduce the effects of COVID-19, as you might be aware.
Right.
Perhaps there was an expectation that there would be faster direct transfers in form of stimulus, but that didn't seem to come through. Yeah.
Right. Here in Kenya, there was some good news. I don't know how the rest of the country will feel about this as far as the youth are concerned. There was some allocation towards the young people because there is this belief that a majority of young people have been really hard hit, especially those who are in the entrepreneurial sector. Talk to me about how the Ugandan government, through its budget today, in terms of the reading is concerned, focused on salvaging the plight of the young people of Uganda.
Now, because of the population dynamics in Uganda, of course, more than 75% are below the age of 30. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the youth, there was a focus on the Innovation Fund in the Ministry of ICT, which has been running. And there is an innovation center that has already been set up for the youth.
Right. I want to also bring in Mr. Ndoho Wohoro, who's actually the CEO of Euclid Capital, and he's based here in Kenya. If you're with us, Mr. Ndoho, you listened to the CS talk about the budget proposals and the allocations that were made today. For you, basically looking at the challenges that Kenya has been facing as far as, the allocation in the different sectors. Today we know the health sector requires a lot of budgetary support, especially looking at what we've gone through the challenges brought forth by COVID-19. What for you stood out in this particular budget reading today?
Thank you for that. For me, the main issue really has been whether we really should be talking about a stimulus budget or a reconstruction budget. Because one of the things that's maybe not appreciated is really the cost of the businesses that have either collapsed or closed over the last 3 months. And to some extent, when you have a stimulus package, a stimulus package tends to be about an economy that's already running normally. But given after 3 months of what would be pretty devastating economic fallout, I would have expected something more of what you'd call a reconstruction budget. Because I think at this point in time, we are not really very aware of just how bad or how utterly how devastated our industries have been, or our businesses have been. And so, in a sense, the budget in itself, I can't fault it beyond the fact that if you are to look at it as through the eyes of reconstruction, you'd be doing a lot more. And so, like the movement, the allocation to the youth, to young people is definitely the right way to go. But I would have expected a lot more.
Right. Well, while you're expecting a lot more, I want us to try and understand even these budgets in their own sense. We know that these national budgets are mostly very technical in the sense of numbers. We hear the billions, we hear the trillions, we hear words like allocations. But that common citizen who sits back at home in the village, listening to this through their radio or watching this via TV, what sort of sense would they be able to make out of such a budget, especially now with people seated at home after losing their jobs? Is there anything to celebrate for them?
It's a difficult conversation because our country's budget is no different from a house budget. The only thing that's different with the government is while you are restricted to your salary, and therefore you cannot spend more than you earn, you can actually, you could still go and borrow a loan, and even then they will assess you on the basis of your future income. A government has the extra gear where they can borrow, and not only can they can borrow almost indefinitely, and they can borrow to both repay old debt even as they're creating new debt. And so the space, when you talk about public debt, is the fact that our government is not restricted strictly to how much money it raises. And because of that, it also means that it's difficult. It can also be a trap of sorts, because it means that the average on the street knows that when the money runs out, that's it. A government can always go and borrow more. And that aspect of borrowing is what I think is of concern, of course, to us as citizens. And over the years, we've borrowed a fair bit of the money. In fact, at this point, you could say that if you look at the amount of money we'll be paying back in debt, that is equivalent to almost all. So I think it will just pass over 1 trillion shillings, which means that a vast majority of the revenue our government will collect in this financial year will go towards paying debt, which means that technically speaking, effectively, the whole budget will be funded by borrowings.
Right.
Because any revenue you bring in, so any most of the budget will therefore, even your salaries will basically be coming, will be paid through some form of borrowing.
Right.
And that is a worry, because then, of course, you're entering into sensitive and dangerous territory.
Right. I want you to stay with us. Let me see if Abubakar is still with us. Abubakar, I want to, I'm told we've sort of lost him, but in case he comes back, let me then toss this question back to you. There's this aspect of the financing of our budgets. Of course, you've mentioned the aspect of borrowing. And in some years, we've seen several countries striving to cut down on dependence on donor funding to actually fund their budgets. For instance, there's a period where in Rwanda, the country did finance its entire budget for their elections, where we see in other countries, we rely on donors to actually fund our own elections. What are the pros and cons in actually borrowing? Because some people say there's nothing wrong with borrowing, because at the end of the day, there is no economy that actually grows or thrives without borrowing.
Yes. Well, on the whole, it's not, debt is only as good as what you use it for. Now, I think it's important to also note that for the last 15 years or so, Kenya has been essentially self-sufficient in funding its programs. And donor funding has only come in to help us with what you call capital investments. But in the last last 18 months or so, I think we've seen a greater dependence on what you call multilateral financing from the likes of World Bank and IMF. But to your question, debt is only a problem if you use it not to create what you call revenue generating assets. or any sort of asset that improves or increases the productivity or the capability of your economy to produce more goods itself. It's when the debt becomes a problem when you use it to pay for what you call a recurrent expenditure. A quick example of that is if you take a loan from a bank and you go and buy a tractor and you use that tractor to increase your ability to plow not 10 acres of land but 50 acres, then you can see that the investment in the tractor is actually a good thing because it increases your income. But if you borrow the same money and then go and use it to have a good time in the nightclubs of Nairobi, then clearly you're going to have a problem because at the end of that, your income hasn't increased, but now you have an obligation. And so debt is really about paying. Basically, when you take a debt, you're selling future income. And that's a critical distinction when you talk about debt.
Right. So what matters is how you use it. Abubakar, I'm told you're back. Abubakar, I want to bring you on this because there's a time when the finance minister was trending on social media on his dramatic description on how the Ugandan economy was actually, I don't know if I'll use it, that sound, in terms of how it was on the rise, and he was very jovial when he was describing this. We are now doing a budget or a national budget reading amidst a pandemic that is global. Talk to me a bit about how much of a beating Uganda has gotten out of this COVID-19 and its handling as far as its budget allocation and needs are concerned. What do we foresee moving forward as far as the usage of whatever resources Uganda has is concerned?
Thank you very much. Would you please repeat that? I didn't hear it well due to an interruption. I'm sorry.
Right. Sorry about that. I'm going to take that again. I was saying there was a period of time when the Minister of Uganda did describe the growth of the Ugandan economy dramatically, in a sense, to actually show that the economy was growing at a very steady pace, just the way an airplane takes off from a runaway. Today, the budget reading process comes at a time when COVID-19 is hitting so hard. My question was, how much of an impact has COVID-19 had or will have in how Uganda spends its budget and the growth of its economy moving forward?
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, we've had a decline in the growth rate from 6% to 3%. That is a major hit, especially considering that we went into lockdown around March, which means that the quarter was almost closing. Now, to have that much impact in such a short time means that we may have a contraction. Of course, when you put things in a broad African perspective, we are projected to contract by 2%. So the first thing it has shown is that our economy is very, very vulnerable to the pandemic in terms of a reduction in the growth rate on the one hand. And there are some sectors which are quite critical for our macroeconomics that have been hit, especially areas like tourism that were bringing in more than $1 billion plus remittances.
Yes.
Then cross-border trade has been heavily impacted by all the measures which were considered necessary. So in terms of growth projections, I know the particular picture you are referring to, which the youth found very funny, but right now it doesn't look very funny. There is a contraction going on within the economy, which has come out in the numbers. Just to put things in a bit more detail, agricultural sector is the one that grew the fastest at 4.8%. And usually it grows the slowest. Services declined almost by half in terms of growth to 2.5%. And the other sectors, manufacturing, only grew by 2.3%. Now, what that has done, there has been a hit on the revenues of the economy. There's the Uganda Revenue Authority missed its revenue target by about 13 trillion. Now, every time you speak in terms of trillions in East Africa, it can be confusing. But in Uganda, the exchange rate is about, you get about 3,750,000 Uganda shillings for $1. So just as a ballpark figure, $1 million would give you about, so $100,000 would give you about 370 million. So there has been a real impact in terms of growth.
Right.
So what the budget has done is to recognize that and increase government expenditure. In the recognition that consumption has declined, because we are looking at the components of the GDP here: consumption, investment, and government expenditure.
Right. Perfect.
So those have been the impacts. Now, one other thing I would like to say that is more relevant to the region is that in terms of recovery, our people in the diplomatic corps probably have to do a little bit more work than just economists, as we have skirmishes around Uganda-Kenya border, then you have skirmishes around Tanzania-Rwanda border, and then Uganda-Rwanda border as well. So when I looked at this whole area, it means that as a region, we have to depend on us a bit more. So the regional integration in the effect of COVID has become even more important, as we've seen that supply chains that go as far as Kenya are more sustainable than those that come all the way in China. To put things in perspective for you, you might find that for some products, to make them, you need about 8 different components. Let's say you're making a pharmaceutical drug and one component comes from China by air and it's closed, or it comes from Pakistan. So the decline you've seen is as a result of supply chains breaking down.
Right.
And despite all the challenges on the board, at least in East Africa, our leaders have had the foresight to keep them going. But there are skirmishes between Uganda and Rwanda, and then also between Tanzania and Rwanda. So there is some diplomacy that needs to take place for trade to flow to reduce the impacts.
Right.
And that's what I would have expected to see being talked about. Thank you.
Perfect.
I hope I've answered you.
Right, you have very extensively. I still want you to stay with us as I ask Ndoho this question. Ndoho, you've seen the comments that have been flying around as far as the budget cuts in several offices, especially the office of the Deputy President and the Office of the President. There are people who've already started reading other messages out of this. From where you sit, do you see this as something that people are blowing out of proportion? We've seen the domestic travel and subsistence budget has been cut, and the new amount is 96.8 million. Foreign travel and subsistence has been cut from 89.6 million shillings to 33.6 million. This is in the office of the Deputy President. Are people just creating a mountain out of a molehill from this?
Well, I think I'll stick to being an economist on that one. But let me say that it comes under what, of course, they call fiscal consolidation.
Yeah.
And basically that means you expenditure control all around. It has to happen. Now, where and who chooses what gets cut is a decision that's made elsewhere. But that should be really the beginning of what I would call a particularly severe look at our expenditure frameworks in this country. The truth of the matter is that you cannot have 600,000 civil servants gobbling up over 500 billion Kenya shillings. It's just not sustainable. In a country of 47 million, I think it almost works at 1 million shillings a public servant. So there's a significant conversation that needs to be had, and I think this is the beginning of it, of the restructuring of government, so that it is efficient, it is a real cost, low cost, best cost, so that it can free up resources to be invested in more productive sectors of the economy.
Right. And still, while we are at it, there are those who feel that, we make several steps ahead and many more others backwards. Let me contextualize this question. It goes to what we're already seeing going out there as far as the taxes on downloading of mobile applications. We know that now we are moving towards almost a fully digital economy because of COVID-19, everything happening online. We have people now having to download these applications to run their businesses. Even as we see this allocation going towards the youth and supporting their hustle, do you see that decision to tax the download of these particular apps as a retrogressive move, or it's something that is in the right place?
Well, it was inevitable that conversation would have to be had. I think the bigger question is, even if you do tax them, do we have the capability and the capacity to collect on them? And also, it's always a fine balancing act between taxing and encouraging growth. So to some extent, it is what I'd call a green field as far as government is concerned. How they understand it's just a new way of doing business, and the fact that more and more of our business is going digital. We do have the advantage, of course, of having a very strong IT infrastructure and talent for that matter. What I think will go to your question also is that in the context of fixing or collecting these taxes, a whole new economy will grow out of both compliance, but also of how a government is able to participate in the digital economy without killing it. And I think I expect this conversation will be a very hot one for the next few months. Let me just add one other thing, that the idea of increasing taxation also has a bit of what we call a moral hazard. If you tax too much, then what happens is people migrate. Businesses being rational entities will migrate from the formal economy to the informal economy. So you have to be able to tax just enough so that people still see it worthwhile to be in the formal economy. But if you overtax them, then it makes good business sense for people to say, what I'll do is I'll shut my business and open it up as an informal business, because there I can survive under the radar. Right. So it's a difficult balancing act for policymakers.
It's a difficult balancing act. Abubakar, if you're still with us, the taxing of social media is not new to Uganda. We remember there were protests even in 2019 over the OTT tax, and today we are now talking about a taxation on downloaded applications here in Kenya. Talk to me a bit about how Uganda has managed to survive through this taxation as far as the locals are concerned, those who've been using social media and still being required to pay for the OTT tax. Tell us a bit about how that has helped grow the economy of Uganda, or actually stifle the growth of the sector that relies on social media to grow.
I must be clear. I think this question, you've asked it to the wrong guy. Having been active in fintech over the last 5 years, I don't have any nice words for anything to do with OTT or digital taxation, and it's on record. I do think that when new sectors are coming up, they are supposed to be nurtured. Especially when you work in an environment of tight capital markets. I want to put things in perspective for you. If you have a good idea in markets with advanced venture capital markets, you can raise capital. So OTT was a very controversial tax here in Uganda. The government justified it. We opposed it because, in my view, this area, why it is so important from an economic point of view, is the demographic of who is innovating on it. When they tell you that, let me tell you what threatens economists most is how quickly can an economy generate jobs so that those youth are active citizens. And if they can get a job, then the government can get a tax off their paycheck. So if a company develops a platform like Facebook that allows Kenyans, Ugandans, Rwandese, and Tanzanians to put their goods and try to trade regionally, and then you start taxing them for that, when you're already taxing the trade. So for me, without missing any words, the data so far that has come out on OTT and the taxing of over-the-top tax and the mobile money tax transaction has been negative. The data has been negative. We had the trajectory, people taking up digital channels change. So the irony of this, and you've asked a very tough question, I know, is that when COVID came, then now it became important that you now know that that guy who has tomatoes, you need to know where those tomatoes are. And right now, the only way you can find it is the guy can put them on Facebook, but he can't get on. So the short answer is that I don't have any nice words for any taxes, not anything to do with digital channels, for the simple reason that I see China being transformed by companies like Alibaba. Yeah. But Alibaba is not the main transformer. What is transforming is that people in rural areas were get into a global market through Alibaba. So now, if you want to East African community, say the people in Meru are producing, call it, cannabis.
I'll request you, because I really want to hear what you're saying. I can hear myself through your speakers. Could you kindly try and reduce?
The reason why I do not support anything to do with taxation on these platforms, because of two reasons. One, the youth. We have more than 70%. They need jobs. These are the platforms they are using to work, to become relevant and become economic citizens. Two, we need to get into global commerce. So we've not run on aid and handouts for the last 50 years. So trade is happening through commerce. Amazon is now one of the largest.
Right. Perfect. Abubakar, I think we're getting you. We'd just like to request that if you can, just reduce the sound of the device that is playing at the background. I think I can be able to hear myself from there. And while we're at it, let me bring back Ndoho on this. Ndoho, when we're talking about taxes, people argue, and some people have said the best thing to do is either to increase the tax base. Some people have said, no, reduce on the taxes, then we'll be able to be fine. Because the more you tax people, the more people run away from the formal businesses so that they can be able to evade these taxes. Which way forward for you from where you sit?
Well, I think the defining moment for us has been the pandemic, the dynamic. The fact that we're in a situation where we've shut down the economy, we are basically unable to raise more revenue to lift ourselves out of it, means that the only way government can fund itself, and we've maxed out, so to speak, to use a credit phrase, with a credit card, we've maxed out our ability to borrow. Then every government in the world right now has serious revenue issues. And so the only thing they can look at is where they can raise funds through taxation. So in a sense, it is a conversation that has to be had. The problem is that in having that conversation of raising taxes, it is one thing to tax the golden egg. It's another thing to tax the goose that lays the golden egg. And where we are at now is the moment you start now taxing the goose itself, and by that I mean a good example is what my brother Abubakar said about the digital economy. When you start taxing places where people are just beginning to raise a bit of a business acumen, they begin to make a living, the tax becomes counterproductive. Now, of course, because of the balancing act with the desperation for revenue right now, it takes a very skilled economist to make that balance so that you don't kill the economy. And I think that's the dilemma we're seeing in this particular budget.
Right. And while you're still at it, before we bring back Abubakar on this, listen, the president of Kenya did announce measures as far as taxes are concerned. We've seen a reduction of VAT from 16% to 14%. Some people have argued, said if we've been able to survive with this 14% over this particular period as VAT, why can't it stay that way even post-COVID-19? Some people have also, on the flip side, argued that by reducing the payee for those who earn less than 24,000, I think less than 30,000, then we are actually increasing more money or putting more money in their pockets. But others have argued jobs have been lost. What am I going to earn so that I'll be able to pay this payee? It's a tricky balance, don't you think?
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. Leading a country is maddeningly complex. And so to the extent that you're having that dilemma, then the spare thought for the cabinet secretary who has to make a call as far as how that decision should be made. I think what we should also remember is, and this is what I call the secret ingredient of why Africa survives despite all appearances, is the fact that the vast majority of Africa's population survives in the informal sector. The formal sector, by and large, is fairly small. And so in the whole conversation around taxation tends to be in the formal sector. Now, it's when the taxation starts moving downstream into the informal sector, then we will begin to get some of the social pushback in terms of it pinching them. And so the question is, how do you even widen your tax bracket without defeating or killing the engine of the economy, and that's a small business. That I think we've not solved yet. And like my brother has mentioned about this increasing the taxes onto the digital platforms into the IT space may actually be counterproductive to that extent.
Right. Will be counterproductive. Abubakar, I want to bring you back to the conversation, and what I want to understand from you is how the region is going to survive and get itself out of these murky waters of COVID-19 as far as the economy is concerned. You earlier on mentioned the need for unity and regional integration is very important at this particular moment. But on the flip side, there's been an argument that the region has failed to actually take advantage of this very important moment to work together. We've seen each country handling COVID-19 pandemic in their own way. I mean, when you look at Burundi, there was a certain way that they're handling COVID-19. You go to Tanzania, the president there has declared COVID-19 over. In Kenya here, every day we hear the Ministry of Health announcing the numbers of COVID-19, and majority of them are from truck drivers crossing the borders, some of them even from Tanzania itself. How does the region now unify to be able to deal with COVID-19? Is this even a reality, or let everybody for themselves and God for us all?
That's a really tough question, but let me try with the economics that I understand. Agreeing with my fellow panelist here is in an environment of crisis, of course, you have to check expenditure. Okay, let's put it that way. So the things you need to watch out from a macroeconomic perspective before we get to individuals is the exposure on the current account. And to explain it in simple English is when we borrow money from markets, when we borrow in dollars, it's extremely important for you to be able to generate those dollars to pay. If you take their shillings, you can't pay. That's where the risks are. So where are those risks? They are on export trade and tourism in Kenya. And so the issues you're talking about of having a coordinated response are important, but now that's politics. And now we have different calendars and different beats. In Uganda, we shall be having an election next year. So those temperatures are starting to rise. Then in Kenya, you've been fortunate enough that the crisis didn't come at a time when there was a serious, exchange of blows between Jubilee and the ODM. So coming back to that, what we need to focus on to bring the economy to stability is reduce unnecessary expenditure. It's a simple way to do things. And then have some bit of expansionary fiscal budgets. Then we've been fortunate that the G20 has allowed us to reschedule our loans. I believe we should take opportunity of that to create some money that would have gone into debt repayments and interest payment over the next 6 months. We should use it to plug some holes. Now, in terms of trade, we are fortunate. The framework already exists within the customs union. And I would like to tell you that the trade between Kenya and Uganda has grown very highly. So while you may be seeing some challenges on the COVID response, really the challenges on the trade response have come from the supply chain and the issue of how to deal with the truck drivers. And that created some stiffness around Tanzania. And my earlier solution to that, I told you, was not economic. The focus should be on the diplomats now to come out, the people who have the talent and the skill to talk about problems. And then lastly, there are two areas I would think about: the food industry and the digital economy. This is where, if you had the economic levers, you should put the stimulus because of the potential impact on the majority of East Africans who are below the age of 30. That's the way I would put it. And so this solution does not only require economists. The failure that you're talking about is not even political, because our leaders, they are cooperative. We've seen them work together. They've brought East Africa from nothing in terms of cooperation, I mean, to at least the East African community, the customs union. So you can't say that there's no relationship. However, the relationships that are deteriorated, i.e. Uganda, Rwanda, i.e. Tanzania, Rwanda border, and then the issue of the truck drivers. At least on the truck drivers, you've seen our leaders come together. So I think the diplomacy or the diplomatic corps of East Africa, especially those that understand the interconnection between international relations and commerce, and therefore livelihoods and economic development, it's now their turn to step up. Then, of course, what you're doing here to have us here, from different parts of East Africa and have this conversation in the first place, I believe is a first way to try and get us to put our ideas together on how we can combine our resources to come out of this.
Thank you, Abu Bakar. Thank you so much. Let me bring in now Ndoho just to take us home on this one, because I'm told we're running out of time. Ndoho, we had the World Bank did actually mention and predicted that Kenya's economy, despite COVID-19, is expected to rebound in 2021. And of course, despite this impact of COVID-19, there seems to be some light at the end of the tunnel. But a majority of locals or the ordinary citizens like you and I probably might not understand this. From the bigger scale of it, it seems like good news, but on the flip side, there's someone who's lost a job and they are now wondering what even will come of them or be of them in the next 6 months, leave alone 2021. Do we have the patience to wait for this rebound? What do we or what should we be doing right now as citizens to be able to support ourselves amidst all this particular crisis, despite this good news from the World Bank?
Well, first and foremost, I'd say that with every calamity or every emergency like this, within it comes opportunity. And we are a resilient lot. I mean, we've been written off many, many times. And so if you also put that together with the fact that we do have an industrial base, a growing industrial base, not quite as quickly as it could have in the past. And the fact that at this point in time, we have we do not have a rich uncle elsewhere, we can call it. It means that we have to find ways to be creative. It will force us to be creative. I think to what my brother was saying about regional integration, if there's a time when that needs to come to the forefront, it is now. The fact is that COVID has proved to us that relying on long supply chains is a national a national security issue. And so the more we can produce of our own, the more we can produce, and I can import something from Uganda and not have to put an order to China.
Yeah.
The more someone in Uganda can import from Tanzania, from Kenya, means that we have opportunity, a golden opportunity now to rewrite the script of Africa.
Right.
And I think to the extent that, and I would even caution that let's not even put too much emphasis on what the World Bank, the IMF, and other multilaterals say and think about our prospects.
Yeah.
Let's now start creating a narrative that says we have everything we need here. Let's, as we've I think covered several times, let's free up our young people to go out there and make money.
Yeah.
But also let's remove any obstacles and make it hard for them to do that.
Right.
And so I'm very confident that there's more than enough talent here. Sweden has a population of about 9 million people. They have an industrial base bigger than South Africa. You tell me, why is it East Africa with a population of 120 million people can set up a complete industrial foundation bigger than the United Kingdom?
Perfect.
I see no reason why. Now is the time, I think, to start thinking outside the box and create that new reality.
Right. No better way actually to end this conversation. I know that it's a conversation which has to continue. It's good we have started it, and I want us to continue having it because it's very significant, not just for us and for the future generations of those who will come even after us in the East African community and the larger African continent. Thank you so much, Ndoho and Abubakar, for joining us on this particular conversation. I want to wish you all the best. Stay safe, sanitize, stay home if you can, and keep away from those large crowds where necessary. I want to thank you so much also for those of you who've been watching us. Lexi Kimani, thank you for that particular tweet. You actually say that it's an interesting conversation going on right now on TV47, and all those who've been watching us from far and wide. We'll talk Africa again next week, same time, same place. As always, my name is Eugene Anangwe, signing off.
We value your feedback, welcome any comments, queries or complaints regarding our programming content. You can get in touch with us on 0768095491 or send us a message on 22047. You can also send us a letter on Post Office Box 235800.